lot of soul.
This is Bass Talk Live. Your host, Mark Jeffries and Matt Pangrack. BTL is brought to you by Lowrance, Lose, Strike King Lures, Bass Cat Boats, Ducket Fishing, Spro, APCO, Big Bite, Sunline, and TH Marine. BTL, coming at you. All right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome once again to another edition of BTL Bass Talk Live, where we're going to talk bass fishing and anything else that we want to talk about. Matthew, welcome back to the studio, man.
You're freaking out during the intro.
That was weird.
There's like a double echo.
Yeah, I don't know why.
I think we're good.
You guys let us know. That was the weirdest thing I think I've seen.
Hopefully they couldn't hear the intro. You dropped a choice word there when it.
No, I didn't.
Oh yeah, you did. That's why I said I hope you can't hear the audio.
I was a little shocked as to what was taking place there.
There was an echo of the audio. But hey, guess what? I get to be here for my first watch party. You did it 2 weeks ago with Mark Menendez, who's sitting out the rest of this year with a medical exemption. Does not have to have surgery on his back, though, so that's great news.
Yeah.
So he'll be joining us surgery-free, and then the fans get to join in, too, and then you actually pull up the feed from Bassmaster.
Yeah.
And you have Mark Menendez, who's been there and done that for the past 25 years.
That was really weird, man.
Yeah, but we're all good now.
I hope. I mean, give us an indication there on the instant feedback if you're hearing an echo.
No, everyone's saying it's all good.
That was weird. Gremlins, man.
Yeah.
Anyway, so once again, the St. Clair Watch Party. We're going to capture the feed from Bassmaster.com. We're going to have Mark Menendez on. He's going to give us all of his insight on what is going down here for about 60 to 90 minutes. And then the cool thing is, if you want to take part in the watch party, we're going to have some fans on, and they're going to be able to ask Mark questions. Shoot me an email, mark@basszone.com. I can only have a certain number of people on at one time, but if you want to try and jump in there, just shoot me an email, mark@basszone.com, and I will shoot you the link. As long as you have a good internet connection, a camera, a microphone, we'll pull you into the watch party, and we will get to it.
Yeah,
So
Mark with a lot of experience on St. Clair, a fishery that's really changed over, I guess, the past decade and a half. Fished there last year, had a 22nd place finish, so he has some very recent history on St. Clair. But like they said, it's a little funky compared to what it was. We're used to seeing, remember that FLW event where everyone was like, oh, it's only a 5, and they were like wenching them in, and it was the spy bait deal, and then what Seth Feider did there. And it's a cool fishery because you never know. You've got the drop shots and spy baits, but then, swim baits and jerk baits, spinner baits, crank baits. Like, you can do it power and finesse there. Yeah. And you never know where they're going to be or not be. So.
All right, let's bring him in now. Mark, how you doing, man?
I'm doing well this morning, guys. How are you guys?
Doing good. Once again, greatly appreciate you taking time out to do this and give the fans some insight on what is going to take place on Lake St. Clair. Real quick, a special thank you to Bassmaster.com, Jim Sexton, and Bruce Aiken allowing us to do this again. So many thanks for that. But Mark, what are your initial thoughts, man?
Well, I thought the house band was great on the music this morning. Give my hat off to them. That was fantastic.
Yeah.
It's going to be a day of lots of fish catches. They're going to catch them multiple different ways. Matt, I heard you say that it's changed. The first tournament I fished there was in fall of 93.
Wow.
I believe that's how long ago it was. And, I still had a little red light going round and round and round on the front of my boat, no forward-facing sonars where I could cheat and see the fish out there. So we were searching for them with our rods and reels. And you were right. A spinnerbait was a major player. And watching some of the footage from earlier, Yellis is out there burning a spinnerbait because he's about my age. He's a little older than I am. and remembers those days. And if you can get those fish to turn to that spinnerbait, doggone it, guys, those are always better quality fish.
Now, the size thing with St. Clair, I remember when I first started covering this, the tournaments would take out, and I'm talking mid-2000s. Yeah, you'd have some one out of St. Clair, but if Lake Erie was open, the big deal were the guys who would run the Detroit River and go into Lake Erie. That's completely seemed to flip in the past 3 or 4 years to where Erie is topping out at 21 or 22, and now most of these giant bags are coming out of St. Clair. Is that just a result of forage base?
I think it's more of numbers, Matt. Back when I first started fishing, if you caught 12 or 14 fish a day, you mashed them. I mean, 12 and a half pounds there was really good. And Erie was kind of the unknown, untapped thing there because it was so big. We didn't have the way to get out there and find that one little hump by pushing waypoint on our units. So it saved those fish out there. And as the GPS got to be more of a player, Erie's numbers went down because they got drugged back to St. Clair in a lot of those tournaments. But now St. Clair has more numbers than Erie does, but the Erie fish still can be much bigger. So it is truly, truly a big gamble either way you go.
All right, Mark, what about the being shut out of Canadian waters factor? How much of a factor is that?
Man, that really hampers a lot of the anglers. The Canadian side, it has a few key features over there. Bell River Hump's one of them, and a few areas over there that when you do get around them, doggone it, there's a lot of good fish over there, and it's fished less than the U.S. side. Even though we have the quarantine going on now, it has less fishing pressure over there. So those fish tend to be a little bit larger. But let me tell you, that ride from Canadian waters back to Metro Park, if the wind's blowing just right, it's not pleasant at all.
Right now we're watching the 4 box on Bassmaster, and it just went to Destin to Marion, but 3 of the 4 there had the spinning rod offshore. You mentioned 93, 94 was the first year that you fished, and we see what Seth Feider and Jamie Hartman and almost all these guys have the spinning rod braid to fluoro. Back when you guys started going to those big water offshore things, what percentage would you say were spinning rod versus bait casting tournaments? Were there 1 or 2 guys that were using a spinning rod and the rest were power fishing, or even back in the mid 90s, was everyone still into the spinning rod stuff when you went up north?
You had spinning rods, Matt, but we were fishing quite different. We were using the boat to drift. We were drifting tubes. That was the main way. And then all of a sudden we started cracking a tube, making that tube jump up off the bottom like we stroke a jig on Kentucky Lake. Those were the 2 finesse ways to catch them. Even a lot of guys were fishing hula grubs back then. And that was real finessey. But there were enough fish shallow, enough good fish shallow that you could win with a crankbait, or you could win with a spinnerbait. And then throw a topwater in there, and that was the real variable on catching those fish, getting those fish into the boat. So as we've developed more tactics and with better line, better equipment, now you're seeing the guys really attack them with this lighter line. Even though St. Clair is very, very clear, you can get away with relatively heavy line out there. You could do 10 and 12 pound line, but there's still a lot of zebras out there, and you have to be very careful with that lighter stuff.
Jeffries will like this question. Cracking a tube and the history of that, and how, I guess, it's still done, I know, but not as popular. Is the equivalent of the Carolina rig?
Well,
in the bass fishing, just as far as something that everyone used to do, still very effective, but not as many people utilizing it now?
Straight up, that is a great way to put it, Matt.
Okay.
That's a great way to put it. It's kind of a hidden gem, and some of the younger guys may or may not know about it. But when those smallmouth get that attitude that they're looking at your bait, and then you've got to do something to make them eat it, cracking a tube can be one of the best bites going, for sure.
Last time cracking a tube won, Jason Christie did it on Lake St. Clair
with heavier line.
Yep. Baitcaster, wasn't he throwing it on a baitcaster?
Yeah, he was. All right, let's do this. Let's bring in our first guest to the watch party. Let's bring in Adam. Adam, what's going on, man?
Oh, not too much. How are you guys doing?
Doing good. Anything for Mark? What's your thoughts so far on what you've seen? What do you want to talk about, man?
Yeah, I was just, I guess the biggest thing, and you already answered it really, was over the years how much St. Clair's changed. Thought that was some interesting info, and seems like a lot of guys are doing a lot of different things this morning, so it's cool to watch.
Well,
Mark,
it's going to be neat to see if the rivers play in this event. There's a lesser population of fish maybe in the rivers than in the lake, but doggone it, there's an awful lot of 4.5 and 5 pound fish. Hopefully somebody can get up there and find them a little secret eddy or a little secret spot up there to where they can get them 3 or 4 of those better fish a day. That's going to be a big play. And then they're safe from the wind as well.
Sure. And what are your thoughts, I guess, with the whole only the U.S. side and everything? Are guys pretty grouped up, it seems, this morning? Is that going to be a big factor?
It will if someone finds a group of fish on let's say a little small cobble field of boulders there that's very small, and 3 or 4 guys have found that'll become a play. It just kind of, I don't know, it kind of rains on your party when you're the one out there in a certain depth zone and you look up and there's 8 or 10 boats out in front of you, even though it's miles and miles of fishing at them. We're all greedy as bass fishermen. We want that whole darn flat for ourselves. You know how it is. And that kind of slows you down. The American side, since the COVID issue, has really gotten a lot of pressure. And on the Canadian side, it doesn't get as much pressure on a day-to-day basis anyway. So it just makes you fish a little freer. And they may hit that crankbait a hell of a lot harder if they hadn't seen 28 of them pass by their heads, you know. So it'll cramp the guy's style a hint.
All right, I want to welcome Justin to the show. Justin, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good. How about you guys?
Doing well. Anything for Mark off the bat?
I'm just anxious to see some of the old school anglers do well.
Well, are you sitting at the boat ramp right now? Are you back in ready to back since you're sitting in your truck, Justin?
I'm actually sitting in my work car watching a little bass fishing.
Oh, okay. Well, we won't tell anybody that then.
Mark, let me ask you this question. We've seen, especially over the past 5 or 6 years, a bunch of these younger anglers that come in, and I'll use the Johnson brothers and a Seth Fighter, who have been dominant in the northern fisheries. I mean, consistently. They don't ever suck. They always catch them. But we've seen some of those guys then transition, learn how to catch them in the south, and become established anglers like that. But what I haven't really seen is an established angler. We'll use yourself for an example. You've been around for a long time, but you don't ever really see the established guys who started down south transition and then become dominant up north. Why is it that you guys who have been around for so much, you know how it's done, I mean, have a difficult time consistently hanging with these younger guys up north? This kind of, you know, throw a Bertrand, a Lucas, a Fighter, a Polinick, all those guys into it. Is there just something about up north that makes it hard for, I guess, a traditional southern bass angler to be very consistent like these group of guys?
Well, what generally happens, Matt, is you get an area. I mean, you think about a St. Clair, you think about a Champlain, and it's one area of the lake really turns on with a better sized fish. I will back you up and say I think there is one angler that has been really successful from the south, and it blows me away. But Bernie Schultz has been deadly at the St. Lawrence River for his whole career. You know, Bernie being from Florida, I don't understand how smallmouth translate into good finishes for him up there, but he is a player every time we go to the St. Lawrence. But I think it's these guys realize that it is very, very minute areas, very, very minute amounts of cover that are really attractive to fish the size that Seth Fighter's just reeled in. Looks like he caught that one on a Z2. You know, doggone good ones. They know that those ultra subtle transitions are the thing. So coming from a reservoir attitude or atmosphere like I have come from, I have so many variables I have to figure out on a reservoir where you would think this would be easier, but it becomes harder because it's a very finite and finessey difference that makes those fish hold where they hold in a basic coverless feature. I'm looking for boulders the size of my car. They're looking for boulders the size of golf balls. So it's really tough sometimes.
Wow. All right. Scott in Virginia on the instant feedback wants to know, do you think anybody's going to throw a hair jig today, Mark?
The There may be a few guys up shallow that are looking for those big rogue 4.5, 5 pound that may do that. The problem with the hair jig in St. Clair is the vast amount of fish are out there in that 18 to 20 feet of water. And a 1/8 ounce hair jig takes an hour and a half to get down there to that 20 feet. So I think we'll be limited on a hair jig. But if someone gets up shallow roaming looking for one really, really big one, you may see that. The drop shot's just faster and more efficient to get it to the bottom in front of these smallmouth.
All right, we saw a fighter just catch that one. What are your thoughts about the water clarity? Is that typical for this time of the year on St. Clair?
Yeah, you get a little bit of algae bloom up there, and it changes the water clarity a little bit. But today the conditions are perfect. I mean, you've got good wind, not an overpowering wind, but a good chop on the surface and bright blue sunshine. And it took me years, Matt, and this is one of the things it took me years to learn, is this is the perfect smallmouth day. I remember the second day of the event back in '93, it was overcast, light wind blowing, and I said, I'm getting ready to blast them. And I only caught 3 fish that day because the smallmouth and northern fish are sight feeding fish. They live in such clean water, they have to see to address your bait. I thought I was going to blast them. I think I caught 3 that day and struggled my butt off on Kentucky Lake or Lake Eufaula there in Oklahoma. And overcast day is the day that we catch those big smallmouth. So it is a complete inverse of what you would think as a southern angler moving up there.
All right, we're looking at the map now, and it's kind of identifying where a lot of the anglers are right now, Mark. Is this typical? They seem to be focused on one certain area, or is this a result of the whole Canadian water situation?
Well, it's both, Mark. Where you're seeing those anglers on that Metro Park flat out there in front of the launch, they're straight out in front of the launch, maybe 3 to 5 miles out there. And that's always a very good area because the way the current runs through there. That's the major swath where the current comes out of the main rivers and gathers and comes through there. And there's always a big population of smallmouth bass out there. And then you've got more of those because the Canadian side is off limits. You've got more people piled in there. But that is a typical good area.
All right, Adam, Justin, anytime you have a question, just let us know and you can jump in there, man, for Mark. All right, I'm curious, Mark. These northern waters, we hear the guys talk about the sun and how important the sun is on a lot of these fisheries. Is this any different for what these guys are trying to do at St. Clair, even though the primary pattern is a drop shot in deep water? How important is the sunshine on St. Clair?
Well, it's everything, Mark. It's everything. You know, this lake is big enough that it has a good population of shallow fish. Someone will do well fishing in 7 to 8 feet or less, probably 4 to 5. And those fish really bite well because they can see. Out here, when they're fishing in this 15 to 18 to 19 feet of water, that's about as deep as this place gets on the U.S. side. It gives those smallmouth good visibility. And when a drop shot rains out in front of one of them like that and falls in front of him, if he's within 15 feet, he can see the darn thing. That's why so many times when you make that cast, the drop shot weight hits the bottom, you pick up and he's already got it, or with a Ned rig or anything that you're dragging on the bottom. So it absolutely allows them to see. It allows them to feed better. And this is when those big fish really have a tendency to feed, is when you've got this wind with this beautiful blue sky up there. This is when these 4.5 to 5, the difference makers, they really feed now.
I've got a question for Mark.
Go ahead.
Got it, Justin.
I live in Somerset, Kentucky. Live on Lake Cumberland. The smallmouth here, when the sun's bright, they don't bite. They shut down. Typically in the spring and when the water's muddy, you can catch them real good. But what makes them just shut down in the sunlight?
You know, Cumberland is clean and it's ultra clear at that lower end. When you're in that middle section of the lake, you can get a little bit of color in it from time to time. In the upper section, you can. I think maybe, Justin, the fact that Cumberland is a triple threat, it has a great population of smallmouth, has a great population of spotted bass, and a great population of largemouth. During a day's time each one of those species has its time in those primary feeding areas, maybe. And lower light in a typical southern reservoir is much better for those smallmouth. They just, bass can't wear sunglasses like you've got on right now.
Right.
So they've got to get somewhere to either ambush because they don't have eyelids, or get in the shade somewhere. The spots love the marinas and get under the floats of the marinas. The largemouth bury up in some of that new growth, and then the smallmouth out there roam. That may be what happens, Justin, is those darn Cumberland smallmouth tend to roam more, looking for feed, because you've got shad, you've got alewives, you've got a whole plethora of things for them to eat out there in that open water, and they just take off. They leave the structure element of the bank and they get out there over deep water, which makes them a very difficult fish to catch.
Yeah, we've noticed that big time this year night fishing. The bigger smallmouth, they've not been in their typical 20 to 25 foot right now. They're non-existent. If you catch a 3.5 pounder, that's a big one right now. The 4s and the 5s are, they're not even around.
Well, the good thing is, as soon as the water temperature cools down, they'll come back. You know that as well as I do.
It's not going to be long.
That's right. That's right. Cumberland is such a good place in November and December. One of the best winter fishing lakes in the Mid-South, that's for sure.
Hey, Mark, one thing I noticed, and I'm old school on this, but I am somewhat surprised that some of these guys are using a butt seat. I mean, I know they're young and they don't want to, use their man card or whatever, but is it not a little easier? And from a safety standpoint, is it not easier to use that butt seat?
Well, Mark, you played basketball and I played tennis in high school and college, and you want to be one of the cool guys. If you're not, if you don't have the cool tennis shoes and the cool this and the cool that, those guys are really, really focused. These young group of anglers that we have, they're very focused on fitness. Where, my group of guys, when we came out there, we'd have a beverage in the evening, and we like to eat. And we had little pot bellies, and we didn't running. Oh no, I wasn't going to run a lick. I was just going to fish. But these guys are truly, truly strong athletes. For me, yes, you betcha. That butt seat is amazing. When I won my first Bassmaster event on Wilson Lake, Pickwick Wilson event, I took a butt seat. It was so rough. I took a butt seat and sat it down on my pedestal. So I was even that much lower and had a better sense of gravity because I was fishing in 4.5 foot waves. I've done that many times on the Great Lakes just to be centered and feel like I was safer. So for me, it's kind of like the old bull and the young bull joke where they're looking at the heifers down at I won't go any further with that joke, get that one off air. But it's just a heck of a lot easier for me not to utilize a lot of energy that I don't need to utilize in a 4-day event.
Yeah.
Adam, thoughts so far? Any questions for Mark?
Yeah, I guess we're seeing a lot of jumping around on the leaderboard pretty quick here. Do you, I guess, especially going back to being on the U.S. side only, do you see the 4-day total being a lot different than years prior, or is it going to hold up?
Well, when we had the Angler of the Year tournament, Seth won it with over 76 pounds. He had a 5-pound average, a little over 5-pound average, but that was in the fall. Those fish were feeding up for winter. They were bunched up. Right now, they're not bunched up. They're in an area like a 2-mile by 2-mile grid. So that angler's going to have to meander around through there and get in that grid and catch him some. They're scattered. So a good fish catch day today will be probably 20 to 25 good keepers is going to be a good fish catch day. But getting that high number, I think about 21.5 to 22 a day is going to be, you're going to be right around it. 20 a day might get you there if weather becomes inclement.
Let me ask you this, Mark. So there's been numerous BFLs out of the area. We saw a little bit of the Super Tournament where we had some guys that ran to St. Clair and fished in it. So we have some very recent history in tournaments out of St. Clair, which is all public legal information for the guys that are competing today. With you fishing on the Elite Series and knowing that, how much do you think these guys are utilizing the public information that's been available from the very recent events on St. Clair, and then putting that into their game plan as far as practice, what they're expecting, how those fish were caught, or is it something that changes on a weekly basis to where that's really not very valuable information this week for them?
Well, Mark asked me the question there out there on the Metro Park Flat. I think that's another part of why there's so many boats there. The two guys that did make those long runs fished right there. They ran all the way from Sandusky Bay to right out in front of Erie Metro. So I think that gives an angler confidence to know that there's a bunch of fish out there. They saw how to do it, the whole 9 yards that technology leads us there. But the thing here is it's not hard to catch 15 pounds here. The problem is catching that 18 to 19 pound sack makes you, and also getting you into the third day of fishing. 18 and a half to 19 will do that. But to get you to the top 10 day, it's going to be a 19 to 20 pound average. You've got to catch those 4+ pounders. And right now, getting 5 of those is going to be, I think it'll be a pretty good job for the guys to do. There will probably be, we'll have, I'm going to venture to say there'll be at least 8 to 10 over 20 today. But maintaining that is tough. Then again, Matt, you've got to throw in there that these darn things are hard to fish or hard to land, particularly on a plug. The event that Christy won, I figured out a plug bite, very much like what Stetson was talking about around cabbage, that I made 5 casts in a row and lost 5 fish in the 4.5 to 5 pounders. They become cheerleaders. They do those cheerleader jumps where they go end to end with your plug and off they come. I don't care what kind of hooks you've got. If you make it through that jump, they're going to come off. It's amazing how they come off. These fish's mouths are so strong that they'll take a regular strength treble and open their mouth while you're fighting and straighten those treble hooks out. So I always use an extra strong Gamakatsu treble hook, a 2X hook, just so they can't flex it. I have to set the hook a little harder to get them in, and that's helped me some. But doggone, they are really hard to land. And of course, why do they always bite when you make an Olympic cast that's about 65 yards, and as soon as the crankbait gets to depth, he eats it? Why do they always do that? That's when the big ones always bite.
Wow. All right, I have a question. We've seen some of the guys in a little bit rougher water when they're trying to fish, Mark, with the drop shot. They're looking at the graph. The boat is bouncing up and down, say anywhere from 2 to 3 feet. Is that an indication of how aggressive these fish are? Because are the guys trying to keep that drop shot in a specific foot range? But then with the boat going up and down, how important is it for the fans to understand that you have to keep your rod steady even though the boat is going up and down 2 or 3 feet?
Well, these fish, you can see Stetson has seen a fish. He made a pitch over there at it. Notice he's not doing a lot with his rod, and that is because of the boat motion. These fish, all you really need to do is get it close to them. They're so aggressive when they're hungry, or you've got this wind, these perfect conditions. Just get it over there around him, and he comes over there and bites it. When it is flat and calm, that's when you'll see that angler really putting a little shaky on that drop shot and imparting some extra action to it. Flat water means that they're just not as aggressive, but when you've got this much wind, they will chase from distance. So doggone it, they're just a they're a greedy fish. If they can get something to eat, they're going to do it right now.
So for an angler like Justin, who's in Kentucky, what can he learn about fishing for smallmouth, watching Michigan, a tournament going on Michigan? Or is there any parallel there and you just are like, oh yeah, it's fun watching those smallmouth, but different species?
Well, what you can do is look to see what these guys are doing and how they parlay multiple techniques. One thing that I always say, regardless of what kind of bass it is, regardless of the technique, what you can do on a reservoir is you can hone that cast into a specific place. So anytime I skip a worm under a boat dock, or I throw over by a stick, or I throw on the end of a point and I catch a bass. I don't care if he's this long or he's this long. Make that same cast again. Make it again. You may be rewarded. You may not be rewarded. But 9 times out of 10, Matt, they like to hang out with their buddies. They're social creatures. Making that presentation before I put that size 10 tennis shoe on that motor guide trolling motor and haul down the bank, I make that same cast again. And during the course of the elite season, I will catch 10 or 15 extra fish that I wouldn't have. I will also take another presentation, a different technique, and throw in there after I've made multiple casts. And sometimes I get one that just finally showed up or needed to see something a little bit different. So try to be open-minded and don't stay locked on how you're catching them one single way. Always try to develop that into other ways. And you might find that you find a way that the bigger fish may show up.
Mark, are you okay with having this number of smallmouth tournaments? I mean, for the most part, the focus is on smallmouth, 3-4 tournaments a year. Is that okay with you?
Well, I love catching fish, Mark. I love, and when you go to these northern waters, these fish they're just so aggressive. I won't call them dumb. They're just aggressive. And you go and you catch a lot of fish. So I do enjoy that. What I'm really excited to see this year is that the season has been extended because of COVID for the Elite Series. These guys are going to get to fish some grinder events. They're going to get to fish Gunnersville at a really tough time. They're going to get to go to Lake Fork in November where fish will start to group back up. And fishing may be really tough. So you get to use some other techniques that we haven't seen in quite some time. So I wish that we would be able to spread the season out longer so that we could fish more in different techniques. We've been basically fishing a spawn tournament season and a northern tournament season. And that's what we've done for about the last 8 to 10 years. And it's great fishing because we catch them by the boatloads. But I would really like to see, Santee Cooper is one that I'm really sorry that I'm not going to get to, because catching 5 there is going to be a real grind. And you're going to catch one on a buzzbait. You're going to catch one next to a cypress tree. You're going to catch one on a spinnerbait, one on a crankbait. That's going to be the toughest way to do that. So I wish that we could have these series of tournaments in a longer time period so we get more pieces of pie to fish with. I really, really do.
All right, right now they're taking a break, so there is no feed. There's nothing going on Bassmaster.com. But I want to make sure everybody knows when we get completed with the show today, make sure you go over to Bassmaster.com and check out what they have going on as far as the live stuff. The leaderboard continues to be updated, unofficial Bass Track. And, Matt, you were right. A lot of movement early.
Yeah, definitely. One of the things I also wanted to point out, and I kind of asked that question about have you learned anything, one of the things that I've been doing with my drop shot, and especially in open water, that I learned from watching live coverage on St. Clair is taking that, whether it's the Z2 or a little fluke or a Demiki shad, and threading it onto a rebar hook or a straight shank hook or one of those Nico hooks. And that was something that I hadn't really done before watching it on St. Clair. And I would assume, is that a alewife, some sort of forage that they like there? And then have you ever done that where you're threading the bait onto basically a straight shank hook? Because I found it be effective in Oklahoma too. I mean, not necessarily around brush piles, but when you get them in the open water or suspended, I've caught them really good on some lakes around it, and that's a St. Clair deal. I remember that, was it Jordan Lee and all them, and the first time they were out there in the Elite Series catching them like that.
Yeah, I would use an O'Shaughnessy style Gamakatsu 1/0 or 2/0 worm hook, and then take a little bit of toothpick and run it through the Z2 to hold it up front. You get a better hookup with that wider gapped Gamakatsu hook like that. So that Z2 is a bigger profile, and you would think that would give you better chance at catching those bigger fish. But those bigger smallmouth really love perch and alewife. It's as much about perch as it is anything else. They can just see that white Z2 so well at distance. Faircloth won an event using a Arkansas Shiner colored Z2 there a couple years ago. So anyway, that gets you that bigger bite. And what you're seeing on the leaderboard now are guys that have found a couple 4.5, maybe 5 pound fish, jumping them way up. You may not see the current leader right now, whomever that is right now, catch another fish the rest of the day because he didn't upgrade with another 4 pound fish. That Z2 deal catches those darn big ones, those big ones.
Mark, is this an event where you save fish? In other words, if you go out and you catch 21, 22, and you're on a pretty good school of fish in an area, is this the type of event that you save fish, or do you try and catch everything you can?
Well, on day one, if at 10, let's say 11, 12 o'clock, I've got 21 or 22, I'm going looking, because the thing here, guys, is you may find a heck of a lot better area, a bigger school of fish, a piece of structure that's holding 5 pounders only. So you have to spend time looking, because you know that 20 pounds is going to be par. So if you've got 20, you know you didn't lose the tournament in the first day. But if you could go and spend 4 hours looking for another area and you find that other area, well, day 2, you might have 25, and now you're barking at really trying to win the event. So there's a lot of strategy that goes on, but once you get to that 21, 22 pounds, it's hard to upgrade on St. Clair. You've got to catch a 5.5 or 6 pounder, but you need to go find you some more 4 pounders. That's for sure.
That's a great comment. Where was it? Where he says he wants to break the season down. Where did it just go? Break the season down into, you have the northern strain smallmouth, the Florida strain largemouth, the northern strain largemouth. Where was it? It was right there.
Yeah, I don't see it.
Did you see it too?
I did not.
I did. I wanted to.
This one?
I'd
This
love
one
to
here?
see
An
a
even
split
split.
between Smalley spots, northern strain largemouth, and Florida strain largemouth. Make sure every year you get all 4 of those in there. That would
There it goes.
throw
Is
a
that
monkey.
it?
Yeah, that would be.
Can you see that, Mark?
What are your
I
thoughts
see it.
on that?
I like Clay. That's a great comment. I would
Yeah, that's
love
cool.
to see that. That would really test every angler's skill on knowing the habits of those different subspecies of black bass, knowing what they utilize, how to catch them. Hey, let's even throw a darn shoal bass tournament in there.
A Coosa
Because
spot. I mean, you could do a Table
table
Rock spot versus the Coosa River spots too. I mean, that's kind of like a northern southern strain largemouth split. So I mean, man, could you imagine that if you had one? You know, you could really spread that out to where you don't have, 3/4 of the season being pre-spawn or spawn largemouth, and then 1/4 of it just being smallmouth.
Well, that comment I made about the hooks and the smallmouth, those fish opening their mouths, I learned that on the Coosa River is how I learned that, and got my feelings hurt by those Coosa River spots. Coosa River spots, the baddest bass that ever swam.
Explain that with the hook deal then.
Well, with a treble hook, those Coosas would hit my plug,
Right.
and you could see them flexing their mouth as they swim by, either on a jerk bait or a crankbait. So you have to use those extra strong hooks because their mouths are so strong. They just straighten the hook out when they flex that mouth, and they bend those hooks up, and they get off so easily like that. That's how I learned about that, and that's why I beef my hooks up when I'm fishing on St. Clair.
All right, right now I've got the feed. We've got the live mix.
Oh,
Not
so
the-
we're just it's just those where you watch them without any questions. Adam, Justin.
Yeah, well, Mark, I'm curious your thoughts on the changes with this year with COVID, stuff getting pushed into the fall. Do you think that we're going to learn? I mean, obviously these grinder tournaments, I agree. I enjoy those, I think, more than sometimes the fish catching deals. But do you foresee Bassmaster doing anything kind of going forward more in the fall, or do you think things are still going to be wrapping up this time of year in the future?
Well, it's all about television schedules and things like that JM has to deal with Bass to get all those television schedules placed together so that we can watch it on ESPN2. I hope they do. I hope these are very successful and very exciting nail biter kind of tournaments, and maybe we'll get to extend that out.
Sure.
One of the other things with my group of guys, which I'm probably the only guy that doesn't. They all love to deer hunt. I'm not a deer hunter, so I love to fish in the fall. They all want to go climb in a tree and look for Bambi's daddy. So that's a very typical thing with our group. They love to be outside and love to hunt, but I would much rather fish. I hope they do, Adam. I really do. It just provides a heck of a lot more variety for us to watch and for us to learn from.
Yeah, and then one other thing with your treble hook stuff. I mean, I've always been under the mindset, listen, it's on treble hooks. Sometimes fish are slapping out a crankbait. I'm wanting a thin hook so I can just get a hook in them rather than having to drive, a thicker wire gauge treble hook. Where else are you doing that? Is that only you talked about the Coosa River spots and then up when you're up north, but is there any other situation where you're going with that thicker treble hook?
Anytime that I'm grinding a plug on a shell bed like I do on the Tennessee River, like a 6XD or a 5XD out there deep, those points, or I'm grinding a smaller, like even a Series 3 Strike King on rock, I will use that heavier grade hook point because it's amazing how quickly a round bend treble will lose its sharpness when it's hitting shells and rocks and zebra mussels and things like that. So I will do that depending upon the topography of the bottom.
Hey, real quick, let's see if we can get audio of Jay right here.
Yamamoto Seiko, paddletail Seiko trailer, smallmouth, I've been liking it. But yeah, I'm just fishing out here on these grass flats and just winding a chatterbait around. It's worked out pretty good. I've caught about 10 fish and I've got 3 over 4 so far. So yeah, that's a real good morning. Pretty happy with that. And I can't get that, so I'm gonna just get another bait.
So that's the power fishing right there.
Yeah.
Down the one that you just caught 19 pounds on, but I'll have to repair that one tonight.
Is it a chatterbait or is it a swim jig?
It's chatterbait. You wouldn't see that on Erie, would you?
Probably not. Probably not. Not out here in the middle anyway.
Hey, he doesn't have a butt seat, Mark.
Well, he's only in 18-inch chop right now, and those old legs of his will stand that. Now, Jay, he's another guy that has a workout regimen. He spends a lot of time walking and hiking with his family up there in the Northwest, always riding bikes, always doing something outside with his family. Jay's in great condition for all the years he spent in the bass boat.
So with the perch and stuff, why would you say, why is white? Is it just a sight thing? They can see the white better, but you mentioned, everyone talks about the perch and all those other colors, which obviously have a white belly, but a lot of other.
Funny question because
let me see what he's saying.
It's a good question, but it's kind of a funny answer. I fished every time we come here. I like to fish these grass flats. I've done good, okay out here years ago, but they haven't been on them good. The big ones haven't been on these flats the last few times we've been here, so everybody in the field forgot about it. I haven't seen a single other boat fishing on these grass flats all through the 4 days of practice and today. So, it's a good recipe for success when you've got an area all to yourself with 4-pound smallies and not another boat within sight. Because you can rotate around from spot to spot, and know that nobody's fished there all day.
Well, that's pretty cool.
Anyway, but why white instead of a perch color or a
just
bluegill
visibility,
color?
Matt.
Just that's it.
Visibility. That white shows up so well in that water. It almost has a halo effect to it. One of the other things that Jay may not have figured out is that the pressure and the normal fishing on St. Clair is out deeper, and he's fishing an area in which very few people have probably not fished. That outside pressure may be pushing those smallmouth to him and getting them in that mid-depth range, in that 8 to 12-foot range where he's fishing. So he's got fish that have been pushed out of their normal place just due to pressure. Lots of boats out there, lots of depth finders, lots of transducers. Smallmouth's pretty quick to put that tail in gear and move off if he feels pressured. So Jay may be receiving the benefit of that. Plus, Jay's going to get to use 20-pound line instead of 8-pound line. So he'll be in more control of the fish when one eats it.
TJ, welcome to the watch party. Anything for Mark?
Hey guys, glad to be back. Yeah, Mark, we see how narrow the St. Clair River gets on your way to Lake Huron. What sort of ramifications would there be if you accidentally cross the border, either accidentally or to avoid like a barge traffic or a boat accident?
Well, right now the Canadian authorities are watching that very closely. They don't want people transporting back and forth. You would, with the boundaries being set like they are, you would incur some kind of penalty. You could get an infraction if you went over on the other side and fished that would disqualify you for the day. Trip Well and the tournament director may put you in what's called the penalty box, where they call your number, you idle out, and you come back and you sit for a specific time period, depending on the intent. If you just crossed that as you were running, you'd probably be in the penalty box. If you went over there and fished on the Canadian bank, which up there in that river, that's not that wide. So you'll be running down through there and you'll see something over there on that Canadian side. Oh, I'll just run over there and fish. And it never clicks, especially when you're old and foggy like I am. Oh, yeah, I could catch one there. I wouldn't even think about crossing it. I wouldn't do it intentionally, but I would just be in the moment and that could happen. So it's pretty tedious going up there. Because there are areas there that are historically good areas to fish. And then once you develop a pattern up there, it becomes very clear what you're looking for in the river up there. So you would incur some kind of penalty, maybe even lose the whole day's catch. So I would stay in the lake just so that I wouldn't catch myself doing something I shouldn't.
Hey, Mark, I'm looking at where Jay is and what he's doing, and I talked a little bit about saving fish or not saving fish, trying to catch as many as you can. This shallow water pattern, is that something that you can duplicate all 4 days?
Well, the area that he's in, there's just miles and miles and miles of that grass in that shallower zone. He may be able to find 5 or 6 hot spots in those areas and just rotate around on those places he has a lot of confidence, because that is so vast. I mean, he may be in a real good shape. If he's figured something out here where he can get 5 of those 4-pounders a day, he may be in a place where he's going to have a lot of opportunity to make a real run at this thing. The other thing that he's going to end up doing, I'd like to know how many muskie he gets to catch in the next 4 days. He's going to have some of those bad boys come after that spinnerbait or that chatterbait. That's just the way it is. Looks like he just either got a bite, or you can see a white zone there where he is. These are not thick grass areas. He's over sand right there, and he's casting that chatterbait and spinnerbait to those dark spots. So you can see that he's on a white zone where it's open sand. So he decided to pick up a drop shot and throw over there towards those dark areas. He must have had something nip that bait that didn't get it.
All right, you guys have any questions for Mark? All right, I'm going to keep going. Mark, how many times on this shallow pattern will you get followers? Will you get followers when you're fishing shallow?
Oh, it's that's the $64,000 question mark, is how do you fire that up? That may be what happened to Jay there. He had a good one roll up on it and just show himself. You have to keep your eyes open. You have to keep other rods ready to make a different presentation, because any cast you can have and what always happens, Mark, is the 2-pounder eats it and the 5-pounder goes, hey, where are you going? So you see that 5-pounder.
Yeah.
That happens consistently. It very seldom happens the opposite way, that way. But you see them. You have to be on the lookout at all times, every cast.
Mark, up north, have you ever, during a tournament, I mean, you probably had this happen, maybe not during a tournament, but during an event, have you had a muskie or a large predator fish eat a smallmouth that you had on that you needed?
It's never affected the outcome of the tournament, but I have been fighting in them, and then I see this submarine that's 5 feet long come up. Yeah, I've had that happen a couple times. I had it happen here. And what's crazy is you'll be out there in that 20-foot of water where we've seen most of the guys fishing. and you'll look this deep under the water and you'll see one of those darn things cruising, and they're giants. They're 48 to 55 inches long. They're near as tall as I am. And they're pretty impressive to see, you know, the muscaloons, as I call it. I remember one tournament at the mouth of the Huron River where it dumps into St. Clair. I had a big group of smallmouth going there that I could see on those sand flats with a walking bait. And every time I'd catch one, this one muskie would chase my goods down. And he finally ate the bait and swam off with my bait. And then I didn't see him again. But yeah, they'll pester the heck out of you at times.
How the heck does this work when you're going to these same places over and over, and it seems like on the St. Lawrence River and here and stuff, the same places are popular every time. Now we've got Bassmaster Live, we've got coverage, we know where everyone else is. How does that work among anglers during practice? You know that the last 3 times you've been to St. Clair and that the FLW's been to St. Clair, you're all in this area and it's got the rock and it's got the stuff. Like, is it homework and it's a different tournament and it's fair game for everybody in practice and you establish yourself the first day? Or is it like, come on, dude, you know this is my gravel bar. I fished here the last 3 years. Get the hell out of here.
Yeah, that's tough, Matt. You know, some of my little secret places that I had down at the St. Johns River in 19,
right,
found out that a lot of my boys were checking them out during the event too. It's a hard call. We're a relatively small group with less than 90 guys, and what goes around comes around. And if I've got a little secret place and it gets found out during one of the events, a lot of times the guys won't come because they know when I'm on one of their areas, they didn't ingress into one of my areas. I'll give that to them. I'll give fair play. I'll let those guys have it. So you can't really be too aggressive out here because this is a small group and what goes around comes around. You don't want to be recognized as one of those guys that's got it coming to him on the come around. So
there are, I guess, for lack of a better term, you're calling dibs for multiple years. I mean, like as long as you're there and stuff, I mean, and people like know, and it's a known thing, like you're like, oh, that's Bill Lowen's spot. Like he fishes this stretch. I'm not even going to, even though it's a completely different year, completely different tournament.
Well, I mean, let's take Jay, for example. There's a wing dam up on the Potomac River that Jay has demoralized us on every time we went back in the 90s. And everybody knew that's where Jay was going to be. And Jay's such a gentleman and so nice that nobody bothered him. And he made a pile of money off that pile of rocks. And that's because he's a fair play and gave everybody their room when it was their turn. It just kind of comes and goes like that. If you're fair play, everybody will give you that room. But if you cut some guy off or you've been aggressive on another area, you try to run somebody else off. It's amazing how people will show up on your deal. So just be nice to everybody and go fishing and have a good time, and that generally works
nice.
out.
More nice. Unwritten rules: baseball or bass fishing.
Oh, well, coming in and poaching one of my areas that I've been fishing for 100 years is kind of like taking a high one up high and tight up around the helmet. Yeah, I'm gonna come after you.
Did you see that? Did you see that deal where the kid got in trouble because he hit a grand slam on a 3-0 pitch, but they were up by 6 and it was later than the 6th inning or something?
That's an unwritten
So they
rule.
were all like, "Oh, he shouldn't." But then that same manager had a quote that was like, you know, they almost made a cut. He's like, "We grind, we come back at all costs," but he was upset that the opposing guy hit a grand slam to show him off. I'm like, it's crazy how many unwritten rules there are in the fishing and in baseball.
Well, isn't that life, Matt?
Yeah.
That's pretty much life, you know. Just be nice. Go out there. There's plenty of places to fish. Just be nice. Give everybody fair room and fair shake. And it's amazing how few of those, how few times my blood pressure actually gets up like that.
So how do you do that in the big water? Okay, it's easy. A guy's going down a bank. He's flipping logs. You're like, okay, let's not cut him off 300. But, okay, we're looking at Jamie Hartman now. He's out in the middle of the ocean. You're wanting to fish in that area. Let's say you've got a waypoint 100 yards away from him, 200 yards away from him?
Yeah.
Are you like saying, okay, I'm going to make sure I go above him because we're both drifting at the same rate, or I'm going to stay far enough away? How does it work in open water?
Well, that's exactly what you do. You explained it well. I mean, these are just big areas, and very seldom in these areas there's an exact place that they hold, because there's not much. This is a featureless bottom up here. So you've got a grid that you're out there, and yeah, you just get out there and you figure out where the drift is, and you just don't drift on top of Jamie. In the AOY tournament last year, I had 1 mile by 1 mile, and Brandon Cobb came over there, and he was 1.25 miles from me, and Drew Cook was over here on this other side, and I had 4 or 5 guys around me, but I had my little zone. And once the guys realize that you're not going to hole jump them or really try to hamper them in any way, it becomes a pretty easy task to get out there and fish together. When it becomes specific casts or specific pieces of cover, then it can be a little more tedious. Had several guys at the Hartwell tournament a couple years ago where I did well. I was fishing a culvert, and you could get through that culvert, get behind it, and fish other water. And I was waylay them in the mouth of the culvert, Matt, one day. And 2 guys, Mullins and Harvey Horn, saw them that were wanting to go through there, and they said that they weren't even going to bother me because I was catching so many fish. So one of these days, Harvey or David, I'm going to want to come to an area that they're fishing in, and I'm going to say, hey, you remember Hartwell? See you guys. I'm out of here. That's the unwritten rule, and that's the sportsmanship that you have to play.
You've never done any good going through a culvert before, have you, Mark?
Never.
Stay away from them.
Stay away from them. Yep.
John Cox taking the lead with 20 pounds.
Hey, there is so much jumping going on. It's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, we talk about it. Morgan Thaler's sneaky good up there, up north, though. Morgan Thaler, Illinois, but he's really good up north. He's really good in Florida.
Yeah.
Always has been. But, I mean, you've got Yellis and Benton. You got Harvey Horn. I mean, listen, I know this is unofficial, but halfway through the first day, you've got John Cox, Harvey Horn, and Clint Davis all in the top 10 right now. It's an eclectic group, along with both of the Johnson brothers and Seth Fider. So some big surprises. You think any of those guys are fishing largemouth, Mark?
That's a good question.
If I had to pick one, I would say Harvey. Harvey is a shallow water expert, but on the U.S. side, there aren't many places that would sustain multiple days of largemouth fishing to the tune of 18, 19 pounds. There just aren't. Now, what they may be trying to do is they've got them 17 pounds of smallmouth, and they've gone in there and they've looked and got lucky and caught them a 5-pound largemouth. That would be a slim chance. But without being able to get to the Canadian side or getting down in the Detroit River, where there is a good largemouth fishery where you can catch 19 or 20 pounds a day, it's pretty limited on what you can do with largemouth up there and where the playing field is right now.
All right, Mark, the Johnson brothers in the top 10 again. I want to know, what do you think is more difficult? Smallmouth guys trying to learn how to largemouth fish, or largemouth guys trying to learn how to smallmouth fish?
Oh, it's going from green to brown. That's the hard deal. It's going from green to brown. Oh, largemouth, he's pretty easy to catch, either find cover or find food. A smallmouth, the problem with them is they're here today and gone tomorrow. They use that big paddle on their tail, that big paddle back there, and they are constantly on the move to feed and be aggressive. I mean, they're like a little bull shark is what they are. They just are always, see, I've been watching Shark Week, Matt.
You know that's on 2 channels now?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's a lot. I mean, you got to DVR a lot of that shark stuff.
I know.
But they're always moving. So when, as a largemouth angler, I find that area on the 3rd day of practice where a lot of smallmouth are, and then I come back and I don't get bit, I'm like, I'm brokenhearted. I mean, they should be right here. They were here yesterday on this zone. There's some rock, there's some grass. Well, on this lake, a half a mile up the bank there's more rock and more grass. So they just take off and swim up to the next place. Very, very hard to pinpoint these fish in one place.
After watching Shark Week every year, I expected ICAST Savage Gear to come out with the baby seal. You watch them, they tow the baby seal behind the boat, and the sharks come up and just freaking dominate that thing.
It's the ultimate topwater bite right there.
Savage Gear always has the ducks and the squid and the snakes and all that stuff.
Yeah, it really is. Hey, a couple of people on the instant feedback, Mark, they want to know, is there markers to let everybody know, hey, you're in Canadian waters, or is that just a GPS thing?
It's primarily the GPS thing. You've got to look at your GPS, and you will see a dotted line, a very minute dotted line that shows the international boundary. So you have to look at it on your electronics.
All right, and then let's see here. Scott in Virginia wants to know, what is your favorite technique that you just don't get to do that often?
Exactly what Jay's doing, burning that spinnerbait. You've got that spinnerbait coming at Mach 1 this way, and that 5-pound smallmouth's going Mach 2 the other way, and it's one heck of an explosion when it happens. That is the best bite in bass fishing. If I can get it going with a largemouth, if I can get it going with those Coosa River spots, that's what I'm trying to do. Anywhere I go, it's just addictive.
All right. Through these previous events, and a lot of stuff obviously has taken place up north, how important is current on St. Clair?
Well, current is the big issue here. You've got areas in which the current's a little less in volume. You've got currents where a darn trolling motor won't hardly keep you in one place. So those fish fight the current all the time. They know that the buffet will come to them if they find something that breaks the current. St. Clair is just this baby estuary of smallmouth, and it has so much food, so many perch, so many crayfish, so many different varieties of food. These fish know that finding a current break they're going to get something to eat sooner or later. So current is the number one issue that I'm looking for. Is it less current or is it more current? And that's what I have to figure out each day.
TJ, any questions?
I got a list coming up.
Hit us with one of them.
Yeah.
All right, Mark, you said there's no real international boundaries, or primarily they're on GPS only. Once you get to the mouth of the big lakes, is there a buoy?
Well,
even one buoy
that you're utilizing as a boundary, or
like, hey, I'm in Erie now. I'm no longer in the Detroit River.
Yeah.
That.
No, I mean internationally.
Oh, internationally.
When you get to Lake Erie, all you see is water 180 degrees in front of you. You've gotten to a really big pond. You still have to utilize. There's not really any buoys there to show you international boundary. But what you have to do then is rely on those electronics to show you that. I wish the guys could fish in Canadian waters just because it shows this place off. This is just a phenomenal place to go fishing. It's one of my favorites, yet I hate the place as well because it can be, you can get on 100 fish a day and only catch 13 pounds a day and be at the bottom of the standings and have caught 200 fish in 2 days. It's an amazing place to take your family. You have to be safe. You have to be very cognizant of boat driving. You have to be very cognizant of wearing a life jacket when you're there. A lot of times when we're in that rough water, Mark, I will have my Mustang survival gear on. I will have an inflatable on just in case I do trip and decide to go out. The current's moving so fast that a boat can get away from you pretty quick. So it's a pretty good idea to have one on.
Adam.
Yeah. I'm just curious if there's ever been an Elite Series event or event in general where it's a northern body of water strictly with northern largemouth. It seems like every time there's a mix when we go to northern swing of smallmouth, largemouth, most of the guys going after smallmouth, but has there been a specific tournament with northern strain largemouth? Well,
I can think of 2 venues that we've been to. One was Minnetonka, where there are a few smallmouth in there, not a big population. And the other one recently is Cayuga. Cayuga, the smallmouth, there aren't many in there, but they're tanks. What are in there are really big fish. But there's not been an exclusive northern tournament that we've ever been to in which it was just a one punch only. It's always a double punch.
Gotcha.
Hey, Mark, remember what happened at Lake Oneida, though? What year was that, Matt, with Tommy Biffle?
Yeah, that's turned into a largemouth deal in the past, too.
Yeah.
Yep. We had high water, and those largemouth were dead on the bank, and he won that event with doing what he does in Oklahoma, flipping trees and ironweed and boat docks and things like that. So,
which was crazy because I remember him explaining, I can see the fish. I'm not sight fishing, but I can see the fish in 6 inches of water on Lake Oneida or Oneida Lake.
Yeah, we're still. What's the furthest south you fish for northern strain largemouth are? Like to. Do you have any idea?
There's northern strains largemouth in Falcon.
Really?
Yes. The days that you get a big northern cold front that comes through there and you go from catching 60, 70 bass a day to 10 a day, the Florida strain largemouth that are down there quit biting because they were affected by the weather, and the 10 you catch are northern strain largemouth. Excuse me.
Wow.
So you have northern strain largemouth all the way that far south.
So I didn't realize that. Did you, Mark?
I did not.
Are there any northern strain largemouth in Florida?
I would say in the northern portion.
You know what I'm saying?
I can't believe he just asked that.
I'm just saying, I mean, your stock fisheries and stuff, maybe they wanted a lake where there's some rich dude who lives on it who's like, dang, I want to catch these fish after a cold front, and they truck down northerns.
No, you've got plenty of northerns there on Lake Seminole. It does the same thing that Falcon does when you have a big front come through, and that's why you can still have great catches on Seminole in those really, really tough post-frontal days.
Okay.
Mark, have you ever weighed in a shoal bass on Seminole in a tournament?
Not at Seminole. I've weighed in a couple on Lake Russell. I caught some there. I've caught some in tournaments at Eufaula. I weighed in a spotted bass at Lake Seminole one time that was caught in the Chattahoochee. I'm trying to think of any that, shoal bass are just such a unique creature. There's just not many locales that we fish that you can actually catch one. So I can't. I remember Peter T landed a lake record shoal bass at Lanier one year. He weighed like 5'5" or 5'15". I don't recall which, but that's the Chattahoochee River that harbors some of those fish.
That's crazy. Justin, anything?
Yeah. What's it like running the big water up there? I mean, I've run Kentucky Lake, and it's been on like a north-south wind, and it gets fairly rough. Some white capping. But what's it like, actually running that big water when it gets rough?
Well, the big water being on the big lakes, the Lake Eries, the Ontarios and things like that, you quit going straight a lot of times, Justin. You're headed in a direction and you don't go straight because you physically can't go over an 8 or 9 foot wave in a bass boat. So you have to act like you're in a sailboat. You have to tack. You run this way, you run that way, and you run a further distance, but you get to that same destination. You also have to spend a lot of times running the troughs of the waves. It's a heck of a lot easier to run those troughs than fight those big peaks of those waves. 7 to 8, 9 foot waves will get your attention real quick, Justin. It's a different animal. I will change props on my boat. I will go to a 4-blade prop. I'll take a Yamaha prop and lose probably 6 or 8 or 9 mile an hour on top end, just so that I can keep the bow of my boat up high. You have to be very cautious, and you slow down considerably. You just factor in travel time in everything you do, and you don't get in a big hurry.
Gotcha.
You want to hit in
Clair's, it becomes a washing machine, Justin. You can see those waves. You don't see any troughs in those waves right there, what you're seeing on the live feed. It's like this. It's just like a washing machine. That is the roughest body of water ever. Those waves right there, that's from a big boat going by. You can see some boat wake there. but that place right there will absolutely jar every feeling that you have loose in your head.
Hey, you see that comment right there, Mark? They want to know what
What's
your
my
average
average speed when I'm tacking or when I'm running? I spend a lot of time running 18 to 25 miles an hour when it's rough like that. You just cannot get in a hurry. You will demolish a bass boat. You will knock your trolling motor off. You will knock your graphs off. You will break the transom. You will break the bolts that hold your outboard to your Atlas jack plate. You have to be a maintenance man as well. Every day that I go in, I take a wrench and I tighten those bolts back up. I snug every bolt back up that I can on that outboard. You have to be very, very conservative when you run that big water. It will tear everything you own up.
I know when the pro circuit was out of Erie, a lot of guys practiced in St. Clair, and one of the practice days, because they practiced over the weekend, right? One of the practice days, it was windy, and they were trying to set a record for the largest raft of boats ever tied together.
Nice.
So there were literally thousands of boats, plus it was windy on top of it. I talked to one of the guys. He's like, he goes, I can't even begin to describe what it was like. He's like, there's just no words to describe what it was like. You take thousands of those big cruisers and then add 15 miles an hour on top of it. He's like, it was the most unproductive day I've ever spent on the water.
And then add current that keeps those waves continually building. Oh my goodness. No, thank you.
Cumberland next week, and you'll see the largest raft up, the Guinness Book of World Record. That's where the record is actually held at, is on Lake Cumberland. From Conley Bottom to the mouth of Norman's Branch, Hanger, you might remember from fishing the FLW last year.
Yep.
That area, they tie up every boat. I believe every Buckeye, what we call Buckeyes, the Ohio Navy, I believe every one of them in Ohio were down there with their boats tied together, and it is absolutely a nightmare.
They'll be there every Saturday.
Pattern, right?
Yeah, they're there every Saturday.
Well, they'll be there every Saturday because they won't be watching the Buckeyes this year.
Yeah.
No, what I remember about Cumberland is you go into some of those marinas that have the rental houseboats, and those rental houseboats, it legitimately looks like they're about 700 to 800 square feet. They're like 2 stories, 3 bedrooms, 2 baths. It's like it's the biggest, most spacious rental houseboats I've ever seen, and they've got like 100 of them just lined up on docks. It's unbelievable. I couldn't imagine being there when it's busy, because you want to talk about a washing machine. You have a lot of bluff walls on Cumberland there too, narrow river fishery, especially when you get down there. That's got to be like a washing machine as well.
Yeah, we get our brains beat out every weekend. You know, we night fish right now. That's the only time you can because of all the boat traffic.
Yeah, Lake of the Ozarks of Kentucky.
Yeah, we get our guts beat out running down the lake, you know, to the lower end. When we get around those big marinas and stuff and the big party creeks, it gets really, really rough.
Now, those are the same, if I remember, those smallmouth look like the northern strain smallmouth a little bit more than, say, like the ones you catch more in Tennessee. Those are, do you know that, Mark, or anything? Are those smallmouth out of Cumberland more related to these smallmouth that we're seeing them catch on St. Clair?
Well, they are very, very related. The difference is what they have to do on a day-to-day basis. Those Cumberland smallmouth are longer and leaner because they spend so much time in that deep water, over deep water, chasing bait in open water, and they're not fighting as much current. These fish right here are on a workout program every day of their life where they're swimming against that current. They become shorter and fatter. I don't think there's any difference in the subspecies. I don't think there's a subspecies difference. Micropterus delomui is the genus species. Now, Jeffries, I learned that in college, so I'm pulling something back into this from my college education. But I don't think there's a subspecies of those smallmouth.
Wow. Well, we've been watching Stetson Blaylock for a while here, and I want to ask you, Mark, is this typical? Do you have flurries on a St. Clair event, and how long do you stick with something before you just don't get any action?
Well, I haven't looked. Where is he sitting on the leaderboard right now?
Oh,
Matt?
let's see here.
And then Stetson?
Yeah.
Not very good right now.
No.
So he's not caught one of those better fish yet.
Yeah, if you got to take, I used
Just under 10 pounds.
Yeah, you've got to scroll
So he's-
3 times with your
Yeah.
with the little rolly thing on the mouse.
Yeah.
That's the how many scrolls to find the guy you're looking
I
for.
got you. Well, what he's doing is the best way to find a rogue school of those 4.5 and 5 pound fish. What he's doing is he's looking for cabbage on the bottom. And this is one of the patterns that I absolutely love there. When I find that cabbage on the bottom is a long single filament plant that has big leaves on it, and it grows kind of scattered in certain little areas. And what you'll find, and you'll see that on the live scope, when you find this area, if those strands of cabbage actually work as current breaks. So when you find 4 or 5 of those, you pan that with your Garmin live scope, and you'll see 1 fish, or you'll see 2 fish, and you can fish for those fish. Those bigger fish get around those and use that little bit of cabbage as a current break. And what he's doing is trying to get in those areas. I bet you he spent hours looking with his units idling around, finding that cabbage. Sooner or later, he'll come through a patch of cabbage, and he'll be a Cabbage Patch Kid. That tells you how old I am. And he will find 2 or 3 of those 4.5 to 5 pound fish. And at the end of the day, he goes from 10 pounds to 19 pounds, and it looks like he knows what the heck he's doing. Right now, he's just in between and has not connected with them. But I promise by the end of the day, by winding that plug, he will find them.
All right. On the instant feedback, Tim in Tennessee wants to know, what, in your opinion, are the best trailer options for a chatterbait?
Best trailer options for a chatterbait. Well, I use one that I really don't want to give it away, Mark, but I will. I use a Strike King Game Hog a lot as my chatterbait or my Thunder Cricket trailer. And I do that when I'm around bluegill. Those paddle type legs on the back of that Game Hog, that creature bait, look like bluegill. And I discovered that in the California Delta of all places, and I've done it ever since. The other thing is some kind of minnow style bait, like a razor minnow, or anything that's got that big flat tail that looks when the chatterbait's moving around or the cricket's moving around. Those are the 2 I tend to use. And when I'm fishing it in a pumping style, I will use a rage swimmer on the back of that so that it really, really pumps when it goes to the bottom. But my number 1 is a Game Hog. I use it all the time.
All right, there you have it. Maynard wants to know, does the cabbage look like pepper grass that used to be in Florida?
No, it is a bigger and wider plant. It may be as wide as 4 to 6 inches wide. When it comes up that stalk, having leaves on either side of it, it may be 4 to 6 inch wide. It does not look like pepper grass. It looks like some kind of a house plant that your grandma would have. It's kind of a light green, almost a succulent type plant where the leaves are pretty thick.
Kind of like what Jeffrey's.
Yeah, right there. Do you see what's in front?
Kind of like Jeffrey's house plant that he loves to changes the house plant out in
There
front.
you go.
Okay, so we've seen Stetson cranking a lot. Is he cranking behind it in the current break, or is he, like on a Toledo bend, getting it down into the cabbage, ripping it out, and getting a reaction bite?
No, he is doing the exact same thing Jay Ellis is doing, only Jay's doing it shallower. He has got a crankbait moving at Mach 1 coming through there to get a smallmouth to just react to it. The cabbage is just congregating more of a population of fish around it just because it's due to breaking that current. But he's not fishing it trying to rip it through. You're not trying to get a reaction bite by hitting the grass and ripping that bait out of it like we do largemouth fishing. This is all about Top Gun. It's all about speed, ripping that thing through there. That's how you get those fish to react to it. You saw he had a bright chartreuse colored crankbait. One of my favorites there is chartreuse and powder blue. I've got some perch colored baits. Strike King makes a really cool perch colored one that they'll hit. What you have to do, Matt, is through the day, the color will change. I will have 5 or 6 crankbait rods there with 5 or 6 different colors. I will start my day with that really bright chartreuse and blue. And then I've got some hand paints that look like perch. I've got some shad colors that I will go to. One of my favorite is green gizzard because they can't get a good look at it. And that one always plays fair about 1 o'clock in the afternoon at St. Clair. That green gizzard does. When the sun is at the highest and they can see it a little bit better, that green gizzard, they won't bite it as well early morning. That's why I'll use the chartreuse. So you have to constantly change those colors. Stetson made a comment earlier I was watching before we came on that the fish were barely nipping at it. And you make a color change that they can see a little better and react a little bit better, and then you get better hookups. You're always adapting that color. And from day to day, from hour to hour, it really does change.
There you have it. All right. We had a little bit of discussion earlier about the hair jig. Blaine in Arizona wants to know, how effective is the big hair jig for northern smallies? And he wants to know, why does everybody throw white?
As far as the hair jig, with the big hair jig, I assume, Blaine, you're talking about a preacher style jig, a 5 to 8 inch style jig. And that being white is representing a gizzard shad. On the southern Tennessee River at Palments, the southern lakes like you follow, that hair jig represents that big gizzard shad. And those bigger fish focus on those when they get offshore on structure. I have caught quite a few smallmouth up here on white. Some days they bite that white hair jig, being a very small marabou jig, only 2 or 3 inches. Some days it's a white jig they want. It's not always a black one. And then there are days when you have a mayfly hatch up there that if you're not throwing a brown one, you will not even get a sniff. So again, it's very much like that crankbait. You have to change each day, each hour to figure out which one that we're going to react to the best.
All right, Adam, TJ, I want to let you know we got about 5 minutes left. So if there's anything you want to ask Mark, just jump right in there, man.
Hey, Mark, we're seeing a lot of crankbaits and chatterbaits. Why don't we see the regular scrounger head?
Well, that's a good question, TJ. I think it has to do with speed. You can't line that scrounger bait as fast as you can a plug and or a chatterbait. That scrounger has a little bit more of a finesse type deal. If we had calmer seas and less wind, that scrounger would be a bigger player than it is today. So on one of the days in which it flattens out, they'll get one of those days here most likely. That scrounger could really play a factor. And the guy that figures that out, where he's not so locked into that speed, and he slows down a hint, that could make a big difference. That would be a real good adjustment to make if it gets flat. Really a good adjustment.
Mark, same deal with the swim bait then?
Yes, absolutely. And the swim bait deal ends up being size. You can wind that thing real slow. It's funny. I take a 2 3/4 inch rage swimmer on a 1/8 ounce head and get on the bank and burn it in the very same places like Jay's fishing and get those big ones to eat it, especially when
Really?
they're very, very limited wind. These darn things can see so well, guys. It's amazing how well a small bait will make those big ones react at times. Smallmouth spend an entire part of their life chasing very, very small food forage. So they'll hone in on something small really, really quick.
We've been talking quite a bit about the rough water mark. Are there certain bodies of water that will drive you to wear the padded PFD versus the inflatable, like shallow rivers?
I tend to wear a regular padded PFD, a regular jacket, more so than I will the inflatable, because I can tighten it up, and in rough situation, it keeps my core together. I don't get beat up as bad. I don't feel like it. My internal organs don't get hurt as bad. Your kidneys and your liver will take a beating out there sometimes when you got to be in a hurry or you've stayed too long or whatever. I prefer that padded PFD more so than the inflatable most of the time. But when I'm fishing out there like that, I may wear that PFD when it's really, really rough, just because it's hard to stay out there and stand up out there sometimes.
All right, guys, anything else?
I got one more. How many of these fish you think have been caught before? You're talking about reaction bite on a lake that gets a lot of pressure, especially with all the recreational. Are any of these fish fresh fish, or have they all attacked a spinnerbait at some point in their life when they're a 5-pounder?
I think they've all eaten a drop shot and a Ned rig up there. Every one of them has. I really think it's about a 30-70. When you look in your live well, you'll see that about 30% of them have been caught before. They're so darn aggressive. You can poke as many holes in a smallmouth's mouth as you want to. That fish is still going to have to go eat, and they just fight right on through it. They're tough fish. So a lot of these, particularly that 2.5 to 3 pound fish, darn near every one of those seem to have been caught. Those bigger ones tend to be alone a lot of times, Matt. Big loner rogue smallmouth, and they won't have a single mark in them a lot of times. So about 30-70 would be my guess.
I got one more on Bass Track here. We've got Brock Mosley just bumped up into 6th place. Is he chasing green ones or brown ones?
I guarantee he's catching. He finished 2nd here that year to Jordan Lee. They were fishing in the same area, right out in front of the marina there at Erie Park or Metro Park. Brock is even though he's from Mississippi, he is a very accomplished smallmouth fisherman. You know, a couple of weeks ago at St. Lawrence, he went against the grain and caught largemouth and finished in the top 5, which was a very impressive feat to do. But he is an accomplished smallmouth angler.
TJ, last questions.
Man, I could sit here for hours with you guys. It's a shame we have to cut it off, but no, I'm all set. Thanks again for your time, Mark, and great show.
Well, thank you guys. I enjoyed it. I hope we brought to light some of your concerns and what you wanted to hear. It's a great fishery. I advise everybody, if they've got a vacation time period in the summer, to run up to St. Clair and go up there and catch some smallmouth. It's an experience you'll never forget, I promise.
We can't end a show with Mark Menendez without saying the words Asian carp. So there, we've said it. Now we can end the show.
We went the entire show.
That's what I'm saying. We had to get it in there once.
All right, we're gonna say goodbye to Adam and TJ. Dudes, thanks for taking part in the watch party. Hopefully we can do it again, man.
Yeah, thank you.
All right.
Plan on it.
All right, there you have it. All right, let's go to here. All right, Mark, once again, man, great insight on what's going on with one of the Elite Series stops, and hopefully we will be able to continue this. I know the fans thoroughly enjoy what's going on, and your insight is most valuable.
Well, I appreciate it, Mark. What you're doing is you're putting the burning desire back in me. It's tough sitting here on the couch, I promise you. Being injured and being off the tour has not been fun. But I did catch my first bass out of a boat the other day. I scrounged me up a little spotted bass on the lower Cumberland River while I was dodging Asian carp, Matt. So I'm getting back into it. It's just going to take me a little while to get back into shape and get back into tournament grade, but I'm ready to do so. And this is a lot of fun. I really love doing this. I really love sharing my experiences. Been lucky enough to do it for a very long time. And I know all of our watchers and listeners, they love fishing just as much as we do, Mark and Matt. It's great to be able to share that with them.
All right, we're going to get you on BTL once, maybe twice a month with an extra show that we're going to do on Thursday. So very excited about that, folks. You're going to get some more Mark Menendez as he works to recover and get back out there and get back into action. So, Matthew, anything else, man?
Nope, that's it.
All right, good stuff, Mark. I want to let everybody know, Monday, big show. Who do we have on?
We got Randy Blockett on.
That's right, and I'm trying to get Austin Felix for Tuesday to back it up.
He's busy catching 20 pounds right now.
Yeah, he's a little busy. So we'll see if we can arrange that. But a very, very intriguing show on Monday, so make sure you check out the website on Sunday for the remaining schedule of next week. And that's pretty much going to wrap things up. Once again, I need to thank Jim Sexton and Bruce Aiken at Bass for allowing us to do this. Many, many thanks. We would not be able to have Mark break down what takes place at these Elite Series events if it wouldn't have been Bass allowing us to capture that feed. So greatly appreciate that. Mark, continue to get better, man.
I will. I'm doing my little PT exercises and walking. I'm getting my step count up to over 10,000 a day now, and spending a little time in my skeeter boat, which is really, really nice. Just going out 3-4 hours at a time. like I said, Sunday was the first time I'd been out in it. And, I was a little sore from picking up that trolling motor and driving around and all the things that we do that we take for granted. So I'm going to get better, going to get back at it, and maybe I'll be a little leaner, meaner Mark Menendez when it comes time next year.
All right. Looking forward to having you back on. Once again, make sure you check out all the action over on Bassmaster.com over the next 3.5 days. Going to be great stuff coming from Lake St. Clair. That's it, everybody. We're out of here. Back on Monday.